Here.
Keith Marion.
Here.
Bill Gerber.
Here.
Aaron Lopez. Eric Newman.
Here.
Cindy Pearl. Here. Heather Dean. Present. Alex Bruno.
Here.
Matt Jacobs.
Here.
Sharon Basili. Alice Kelly. Frank O'Reilly. Bill Pierce.
Here.
Marcy Collier. Here. Josh Garthwell.
Here.
Joe Siebert.
Here.
Ruth Smay.
Here.
Jay Wolf.
Here.
Matt Ambrose. Steve Ferris.
Here.
Hannah Gale. Here. Lisa Hayden. Here. Lauren Bobek. Mark McDermott. Jill Vergara. Here. Karen Wackerman. Here. Terry Mersham. Here. Kimberly Iacono. Here. Christine Messina. Here. Kate Tallman.
Here.
Brian Farnan.
Here.
Drew Georgiadis. Here. Doreen Herron. Here. Margaret Horton. Here. Sam Cargill.
Here.
Michael Hurley.
Here.
Frank Matisse.
Here.
Eric Stoneman.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for a moment of silence. Please be seated. The first item on our agenda tonight is to hear an address on the state of the town by the first selectman. Mr. Tetro?
Thank you and good evening. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, members of the Board of Selectmen, members of the Board of Finance, members of our representative town meeting, our state delegation, other elected officials, and members of the public for this opportunity to provide you with an update on our town. This is my 7th State of the Town address. There's so much to say. This has been one of the most challenging years in recent memory. Our town is financially strong and economically vibrant, but the trends at the state and at the federal level are having an impact. So I'm going to take a slightly different approach this year. In the past, I reviewed all the accomplishments from the various departments, and we've accomplished a lot this past year. But I'm going to cover these achievements at another time. This year, I'm going to provide updates on the state budget, property taxes, and economic development. It's been a real roller coaster of a year, following the state budget discussions and a projected impact on the town. The state budget was passed in October. It included about $4.7 million in municipal aid for the town of Fairfield. This amount is 50% less than it was just 24 months ago. In the post-budget adjustments, Fairfield was cut by almost another $1 million. Most of this adjustment coming in the reduction in the payment in lieu of taxes, or pilot funding. This is the money that we get because Fairfield U and Sacred Heart University do not pay property taxes to the town. This is also the first year that we'll be losing almost $2 million in property tax revenue from the GE property. The state budget is reportedly currently to have another $220 million shortfall in revenue. We are waiting to see what adjustments or cuts will be made to plug this gap. Historically, municipal aid was one of the larger categories in the budget that the state has looked to cut funds or cut to fund shortfalls in this area. We're managing through these cuts with a combination of initiatives: a strategic hiring freeze, selected hold on capital projects, use of funds in certain reserve accounts, including our prior year surplus, a new firefighters contract that had 0 raises in this year, and a big thank you to our department heads who are also going without a raise this year. There's some new unfunded mandates. The town's financial relationship with the state continues to change as we see additional unfunded mandates included in this new budget. The rental reimbursement program for elderly and disabled provides about $100,000 to Fairfield residents. This year, after the state sent out the rental reimbursement checks, the state informed the town that it would be withholding 50%, or approximately $50,000, from our educational cost-sharing funds to help pay for this program. There's also a property tax credit program the state offers to the elderly and disabled. This program provides about $414,000 in support to those who qualify. The town provides a credit in the June tax bills, and the state, this year, the state informed us that we will not be getting our reimbursement. The state didn't eliminate the program, they just eliminated our reimbursement. And I want to make it clear to our elderly and disabled residents who count on these credits from the town of Fairfield, we will not let you down. We will fund these important programs despite the lack of support from the state. As many of you know, the state spent over $10 million in building a new, larger regional fire training facility in Fairfield. In this state budget, the first one after the completion of the facility, the operating budget support of $70,000 was eliminated. I'll continue to work with our fire chief and our state delegation to get this funding restored. This state project should not be an obligation left to Fairfield taxpayers. Historically, we received some state support for the financial costs of our investment in education and in our school operating budget in the form of educational cost sharing funds, or ECS. Just 24 months ago, we received $3.5 million annually. In this budget, that amount has been cut to less than $1 million. This cut represents a property tax increase of 1% just to cover the lost revenues. One of the biggest challenges this past year has been the fight against the state transferring teachers' pension costs to the towns. In Fairfield's case, it was proposed we pay $9 million to the state. I was one of the leaders working with other first selectmen and mayors in fighting against this transfer. And I want to thank our state delegation for keeping this cost transfer out of the final budget. There is some good news. While the ECS aid that goes directly to the town's general fund revenues, in addition to that money, the Board of Ed does receive other funding from the state. One source of revenue is for special ed excess costs. We historically have received an amount in the range of $3.3 million. We were concerned this funding was at risk. However, it appears this year the board will receive closer to $4 million in aid in this category. While this is an increase, it is not truly extra money since it is a reimbursement for expenses that have already been spent. In another category, the Board of Ed was concerned that the state would stop funding residential support for some of our special needs students. This funding is worth about $1 million per year, and fortunately the state has continued this program. We also have a new set of federal tax law changes. It is not clear what the impact to everyone here in Connecticut will be. I am hearing from several business owners that they may see a real positive impact due to the lower tax rates. I'm also hearing concerns from realtors about the possible negative disruption in the real estate market. The new state and local tax, or SALT, treatment is an obvious concern. I've asked our tax attorney to explore the possibility of setting up a local charitable trust as an approach to continue to allow an IRS deduction for property taxes. There are several towns in New Jersey and a few others in Connecticut that are also exploring this option. It will take special enabling legislation from our state, and I'll work with our state delegation on this endeavor. I'm also talking with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities to get their support. We hear about the challenges facing our state. The need for billions in transportation improvements and upgrades is certainly one area. What many people don't realize is Connecticut is a net donor state to the federal government. We give much more revenue to our federal government than we receive back in aid. In fact, on a per capita basis, we're ranked third in the country in how much we contribute to the federal government. However, we rank 33rd per capita in how much money we get back from the federal government. The lack of county government structure accounts for 2/3 of the missing dollars. I'm working with MetroCog, our regional planning group, on applying for an economic classification that will give MetroCog a status equivalent to that of a county to help us qualify and apply for these funds. We want to bring these missing federal dollars back to our state. Fortunately in all this, our town is in a very strong financial position. We're one of the few towns in the state with a AAA rating from 3 major credit rating agencies. Our pension fund is 90% funded. We're making 100% of our retiree medical, or OPEB, annual recommended contributions, and we have a strong fund balance reserve. In addition, we have the 5th lowest mill rate in Fairfield County. Darien, New Canaan, Westport, and Greenwich are towns with lower mill rates. Towns like Weston, Wilton, Ridgefield, Reading, Easton, and Trumbull all have higher mill rates. The question I often get asked is, why does Westport have a lower mill rate? Let's review some history. 20 years ago, Fairfield and Westport had similar mill rates. Fairfield was in the 25 mill range, Westport was in the 23 mill range. Fast forward 20 years, Fairfield's still at 25, but Westport has dropped to the 16 mill range. What happened? Let's look at expense budgets. Did Westport stop spending or cut expenses in areas Fairfield didn't? The answer is no. In fact, Westport's expense budgets grew at a higher percentage over this time than Fairfield's did. Westport is spending more money. What Westport did was grow its grand list, the total amount of assessed property in the town. 20 years ago, Fairfield had a grand list valued at about $4 billion, and Westport had a grand list valued at $3 billion. Move ahead 20 years, Fairfield's grand list has grown to about $10.8 billion. However, Westport's grand list has grown to over $11.2 billion. This is magnified by the fact that Westport has only half the population that Fairfield does. So there's a large grand list growth per capita per resident in Fairfield, in Westport rather. The growth in grand list dollars has allowed Westport to spend more in expenses per capita to fund the same town services and yet still lower its mill rate. It's a similar story for Darien, New Canaan, and Greenwich. They each grew their grand list faster than Fairfield did. The lesson here is that we cannot get to a lower mill rate just by cutting expenses. Fairfield cost per capita for providing town services is lower than the 4 towns with a lower mill rate. The cost of services per capita is one of the key indicators demonstrating our efficiency in service delivery. It is the quality of our school system that is most often given reason for people who move to Fairfield. We have a strong commitment to quality education. We invest 65% of our budget every year in our school system. Even though that is our largest expense, in a recent survey, Fairfield ranked 89th in the state out of 169 towns in spending per pupil. Certainly being ranked in the bottom half of the state is not our goal. While some question whether this is the best ratio to measure investment in education, there are not many others to choose from. Prospective buyers evaluating our town do use this ratio as a guide to judge the ongoing commitment to quality education. Only looking to cut costs leads to cutting services. We don't want Fairfield to lose value. We want Fairfield to grow in value. We can and will continue to improve our cost management. This past summer, I asked our department heads to survey 3 other towns and look for ways to improve services, costs, and revenue. We have a commitment to giving our residents the best value and using best practices. The department heads came back with close to $2 million in cost savings and revenue improvements. We are also looking to share services with neighboring towns to achieve cost savings. We had a collaborative effort with 14 other towns to save over $400,000 per year in solid waste management. We have an effort underway to combine ECC, or Emergency Call Center, the 911 operations, with Westport. It would mean moving our call center to the Sacred Heart GE campus. This would move it out of a basement in a flood zone and save our town substantial moving and fit-up costs. Big thank you to Sacred Heart University for your support and your efforts to save our town money. It's clear from the other 4 town examples that to control our mill rate growth, we need to grow our grand list. The 4 towns I reviewed grew their grand list primarily by growing their residential base. They built large homes on large properties. We need to look at growing our commercial tax base. We do not have the plentiful supply of land available in residential neighborhoods. Adding residential homes also adds higher service costs. As I mentioned earlier, an example is our 65% of our operating budget goes to fund education costs. Only 4.5% of our town land is zoned for commercial use. However, it generates 10% of our income. This is a very productive use, and we have over a 90% occupancy rate in our commercial buildings. There are only two primary ways to grow our commercial tax base: either expand our commercial land area or add value to the current land area zoned commercial. Do we look to expand our commercial zones to 5 or 5.5% of our land base? Do we look to increase the value of existing commercial zones? Do we look to allow greater density with 5, 6, or even 7-story buildings in certain zones? Two recent projects that brought in new tax dollars are the Trademark Mixed Use Project and the OSG Medical Facility, which is actually reinventing the way medical care is delivered. Both are located down by the Fairfield Metro train station. The key to any approach is to maintain our town's charm and character. We need to be strategic and targeted with any commercial zone changes. We need to protect our heritage in downtown, in Fairfield, in downtown Fairfield, in Southport Village, our historic districts, and in our residential neighborhoods. Much has been made of millennials and their desire to move to urban environments. We are now starting to see the next trend: millennials marrying, starting families, and looking for high-quality school systems. This means they're beginning to look at towns in Fairfield County. Fairfield has a strategic advantage that appeals to this demographic group of young families. We're the one town in Connecticut where you can live within walking distance to the beach, to downtown, and to the train. Walking means less traffic and less congestion. TOD, or transit-oriented development, means building near train stations and transit centers, which leads to less traffic and less congestion. The Town Plan and Zoning Commission, our TP&Z, has a more important role than ever in shaping this future growth. However, it's crucial that we all work together to shape Fairfield's future. We have more initiatives underway than ever before to move our town forward. Our Economic Development Commission recently completed a long-range plan. This plan covers a wide range of actions to guide process improvements. This includes working closer with our 2 universities, which provide a definite competitive advantage over other towns. Mark Barnhart, our Economic Development Director, is engaging business leaders and other stakeholders in developing a marketing plan to retain and attract businesses to Fairfield. In addition, Fairfield has joined the Fairfield County 5. This is a multi-town economic development initiative led by Fairfield, Westport, Norwalk, Stamford, and Greenwich. We are targeting tri-state businesses to sell them on benefits of locating in Fairfield County. We're working together on our marketing initiatives, including business recruitment presentations in New York City. Fairfield has a strategic plan to lead the development, the strategic plan committee to lead the development of an overall strategic plan. This will engage our community stakeholders in developing guidelines and values for our town over the next 5, 10, and 15 years. Our Town Plan and Zoning Commission is looking to update our plan of conservation and development. This plan is the foundation for strategic and targeted development while maintaining the character and charm of our town and neighborhoods. In summary, Fairfield has significant challenges ahead with reduced municipal aid and reduced state education funding. The state and federal government are redefining their relationships with our town. Fairfield is in strong financial position to weather these storms. We still need to work to manage our costs without hurting key town services and programs. In order to control the mill rate growth, we need to grow our grand list in a strategic and thoughtful manner. At a recent presentation to our Chamber of Commerce, John Traynor, Executive Vice President, People's United Bank, stated, "Fairfield is the model for the rest of the state of Connecticut. Working together, we'll make Fairfield a leader in moving Connecticut in the right direction." Thank you.
Next on our agenda, item 3, to receive a report from the first selectman or his designee on leases of town properties.
Good evening, all. I am the designee, and you all have a lease report that was sent to you in your backup. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them and try to answer them. Thank you very much.
Item 4, to hear a report from the blight officer concerning condemnation and blight.
Good evening, everyone. I think everybody got my email. Did everybody get a blight report? I just wanted to add to it that Heather Dean and Attorney Lesser are working with our blight committee to make some administrative changes to make the blight ordinance go a little bit faster for us. We find it very burdensome in how we make our approach to getting on the agenda and getting it taken care of. So both of those, Representative Dean and Attorney Lesser, have been a big help so far. Any questions? Can't believe everybody came out just for me. Thank you very much.
Item 5, to consider and act upon the minutes of the regular meeting held on December 18, 2017. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Representative Dean, seconded by Representative Hurley. Is there any discussion on this item? Representative Hurley.
Michael Hurley, RTM District 10. I'd like to make an edit to the minutes as it relates to the summary that I provided on the floor of the RTM December 18, 2017 on item number 10. And it's the third sentence in the paragraph. It says the rate of inflation has been 0.16% for the last 6 months. What I said was the rate of inflation has been 1.96 for the last 6 months. So I would like to amend the minutes to reflect that change from 0.16% to 1.96%.
Is there a second for Mr. Hurley's motion to amend the minutes? Seconded by Representative Ambrose. Is there any discussion on Representative Hurley's motion to amend the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor to amend the minutes as stated by Representative Hurley, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We will now act upon the minutes as amended. Is there any further discussion on the minutes of the regular meeting held on December 18, 2017? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. We now have a consent calendar under Rule 22 of the Rules to Regulate. The following items are eligible for a consent calendar, having received unanimous approval in committee. Items 6, 7, 8, 12, 13, and 14. These may be divided by a member for purposes of debating and or voting. Do I have a motion to approve the items on the consent calendar? Moved by Representative Wackerman, seconded by Representative Dean. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Abstentions? The consent calendar carries unanimously. We'll now move to item 9, to consider and act upon the following appointment of an alternate to the Harbor Management Commission as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Jacob M. Hirschler, Democrat, 1226 Pequot Avenue, term November 2017 to 2019. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Representative Siebert, seconded by Representative Lefkowitz. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Item 10, an update regarding the H. Smith Richardson Clubhouse Building Committee. We received a report in committee on the building committee. Is there any further follow-up or discussion from the members of the body? Seeing none, we'll move on to the item number 11, to hear, consider, and act upon the following appointments to the H. Smith Richardson Clubhouse Building Committee as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Edna Albrecht, Christopher Kakatis, Craig Curley, Donald DiMartino, Frank Geiger, Tamara Guarino, Jeffrey Hendrickson, Kimberly Marshall, Harold Schwartz, Jack Slane, and Rodney Van Dusen. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Representative Vergara, seconded by Representative Dean. Is there any discussion on this item? Is there any comment from the public? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Representative Bateson, Representative Hurley, Representative Iacono. Any others? Any abstentions? Representative Lefkowitz. Motion carries. Item number 15, the moderator has referred an ordinance establishing a housing trust fund sponsored by Edward Bateson, District 1, Heather Dean, District 3, Bill Pierce, District 4, Josh Garskoff, District 5, Karen Wackerman, District 7, Jill Vergara, District 7, Pamela Iacono, District 8, and Michael Hurry, District 10, to the Legislation and Administration Committee under Rule 32 of the RTM Rules to Regulate. LNA voted this unanimously out of committee, so it'll come to the RTM in February. I'll now entertain a motion to table item number 16 to establish the Senior Tax Relief Committee so we can get to the teacher's contract. Moved by Representative Garskoff, seconded by Representative Wackerman. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries. So we'll now move to item number 17 on the supplemental warning to consider and act upon the following resolution recommended by the Board of Education. Resolved that in accordance with the Connecticut General Statute, Section 10-153D, subsection B, the collective bargaining agreement between the Board of Education and the Fairfield Education Association for the period of July 1, 2018 through July 30, 2021 is rejected. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Representative Dean, seconded by Representative Lopez. Is there any discussion on this item? Representative Durrell. Use the other mic.
I'll go over here. Alex Durrell, RTM 3. Sorry for not being here for the speech. I got a text from my wife to pick up my son at a music class. I'm sure most, but not all of you know what that's about. Anyways, I'm currently being sued by a teacher in the Fairfield Public School System, and therefore I will have to abstain from voting on this contract.
Is there any other comment or discussion from members of the body? Representative Ambrose, then Representative Farman.
Peter Ambrose, District 1. We're being asked tonight to approve a new 3-year labor contract for our teachers. I believe we are unanimous on 4 major points, although members of this body may disagree on which way to vote. We are unanimous in our commitment to do what is best in the long-term interest of our town. We are unanimous in our great appreciation and our respect for what our dedicated teachers do for our children and for our town. We are unanimous in the belief that great schools are essential to Fairfield's ability to continue to prosper and to attract new residents. Finally, we are unanimous that fiscal responsibility is also essential to Fairfield's future prosperity, which means that we must balance the cost of our public services with the ability and willingness of our residents to pay for the same. No one loves and respects teachers more than their children. As many of you know, my father was a high school teacher in Fairfield for 40 years. Regrettably, I will be voting tonight to reject this contract because I feel strongly that we cannot continue to increase the town's labor costs faster than the growth and the ability of Fairfield residents to pay for them, particularly at a time when we face such great uncertainty because of the state's anemic economic growth and its growing fiscal crisis. First, a few important facts. According to page 27 in Superintendent Jones's 2018 to 2019 proposed budget, total labor costs in the current fiscal year, 2017 to 18, will be $131 million, $106 million of which will be in salaries, and $25 million in benefits, which represents 78% of the total school spending of $168 million. Salaries and benefits covered by this contract represent 76% of total labor costs. And so what we do for teachers sets the standard for all school employees. The $131 million also represents 44% of our town's total budget for this year of $298.5 million. And so what we do with educational labor costs is also important to what happens to overall town spending. The proposed contract will raise teacher salaries costs by 8.2% over the next 3 years. The superintendent's 2018-2019 proposed budget assumes that the cost of health insurance will increase 7% next year. If salaries, which are about 80% of the total compensation, increase 2.65% annually, and if benefits, 20% of the total, increase 7% annually, the total labor costs will increase 3.5% annually, or almost 11% compounded over 3 years. If we are lucky, and the benefit costs only increase 5% annually, the weighted average combined increase will still be 3.1% per year, or almost 10% over the next 3 years. In either case, the increases are much greater than the current rate of general price level inflation of 1.5 to 2%. Based on these facts, and for the following reasons, I do not believe we can afford to continue to increase our labor costs faster than the rate of inflation at a time when we face draconian risks and challenges to our town budget. Slow personal income growth. The incomes of the people who must pay for public services have been growing very slowly in Connecticut. According to a recent article in the Connecticut Mirror, personal income growth wasn't just poor over the past decade. During the last fiscal year, Connecticut's personal income fell 0.6% compared with the prior year. One of just 10 states to fall nationally and 5th lowest overall. Tax reforms have increased the after-tax cost of state and local governments. The after-tax costs of state and local government for our taxpayers just increased because of new restrictions on the deductibility of state and local taxes for federal income tax purposes. Taxpayers who spend more in total on mortgage interest, state income taxes, and total property taxes than the new standard deductions will be affected, which includes many Fairfield residents, because local taxes alone for the owner of a median Fairfield home now exceed $11,000. According to our tax assessor, around 5,000 of our property owners paid their third and fourth quarterly tax installments before the end of 2017. The 5,000 residents who just prepaid represent approximately 1/4 of all our residential taxpayers. The state's deepening fiscal crisis. Connecticut still faces a serious and deepening financial crisis, the consequences of which are likely to include higher state taxes in one form or another on income, on purchases, on property, and on users, including just tonight, the highway tolls have been proposed. Continued weak growth in the economy, jobs, and income. The loss of municipal aid from the state for both operations and school construction. The increasing possibility that towns will have to bear directly some of the cost of teacher retirement benefits. And further downward pressure on home values, which reality is causing many town residents to flee this town and our state. Our tax base is eroding. We have just lost approximately $2 million, or $1.7 million, in real estate taxes when GE left Fairfield. In addition, the market value of the taxable property in Fairfield is down 10% from its 2011 peak to $15.4 billion from $17.2 billion. And home values remain under pressure, particularly at the higher end of the market. A recent Moody's analysis report estimates that Connecticut's average home values are likely to decline 5.6% this year because of the federal tax reform. In Fairfield County, with an expected 7.9% impact, ranked 21% on Moody's list of U.S. counties most affected by tax changes. Meanwhile, with a 23% office vacancy rate in Fairfield County, Stamford at 27%, and retailers downsizing due to e-commerce, there's little hope that we can significantly increase our commercial tax base in the near future. For all of the aforesaid reasons, I believe it is not responsible to approve continued increases in wages and benefits for public employees at 3% to 4% annually, unless we exercise fiscal restraint and share the pain of dealing with the financial crisis. We're putting the long-term interests of the town at risk with the quality of all our public service. Finally, I will briefly respond to some of the counter-arguments that have been offered. Some argue we should ignore the salary increases due to the so-called step increases, because they would have happened anyway. For those not familiar with the term, these step increases pay teachers more in their first 20 years on the job based solely on longevity. My response is an increase is an increase, no matter what you call it, and both steps and general wage increases are open to negotiation, as is obvious in the terms of the contract we are being asked to approve. Some argue that we have no choice because other towns pay teachers more and that we are not competitive. My response is that no evidence has been offered that Fairfield Public Schools has greater employee turnover than any other school districts due to compensation issues. It may be true that we will lose the physics teacher or a math teacher to another school district. However, that possibility does not warrant an overall general increase across the board compensation for all teachers. Some argue that we have no choice because if we go to binding arbitration, we will lose. We've even been warned that the cost of binding arbitration could be twice the $90,000 it cost us last time. My response is that this may be true, but if no representative town body in Connecticut has the courage to say stop, the unions will continue to ratchet up compensation by demanding that Fairfield pay more because Weston paid more, because Reading paid more, because Brantford paid more. Passing the buck must stop somewhere. Some argue we should assume that actual labor costs will probably increase, less than the rates we are being asked to approve. My response is that although this may be true, we have no idea what the cost to our children will be of the need to find offsetting savings, and that the possibility of offsetting savings does not justify granting compensation increases that are not affordable or sustainable. Will we have to cut classes in music or sports programs?
Representative Ambrose, at this point, you have the floor for, I think, about 15 minutes.
I'll be through in a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Some argue that we are allowed to reopen this contract if the state makes us pay teacher pension costs. My response is that although this may be a good provision in the contract, unfortunately, we are not allowed to reopen this contract if the state imposes higher education costs on towns like Fairfield in any other way, which is more likely. In conclusion, I hope I have pointed out enough reasons to reject this contract because it is too rich and it is not in the best long-term interests of our town, of our great school system, and all our great public services. Connecticut is in big trouble because it allowed spending to grow faster than what taxpayers were able to pay, including over-generous compensation for state employees. Let's not make the same mistake here in Fairfield by locking in higher labor costs for the next 3 years at a time of great economic uncertainty. Thank you.
Representative Farnan?
Brian Farnan, District 9. I'd like to lead off with its one page. It's only one page, and it's big font. I'm pro-education. I've been that awkward one dad at a PTA meeting. I'm from a family that includes teachers, school administrators. I've got 2 kids in public schools. I love the teachers that teach them. They happen to be here, so I am the jerk, not them. But the reality is, no matter what I say up here, it's going to pass, so don't be too concerned. And the reality, and I've been in leadership on this RTM, and I do believe that if you can have, spend the money, prioritize your schools, hold the line on spending, that's a win-win in a bipartisan manner for a successful town. The reality is, if you compound it annually, it's an 8.2% raise over these 3 years, and it's just not reasonable in the current fiscal crisis we have. Let me repeat, 8.2%. And a contract like this will lead to a tax increase that we can't pass on to our taxpayers in the current environment. Between the state budget crisis, with no end in sight, the new federal tax plan that punishes the Northeast, or GE leaving, this is not the time to approve an increase of this size. The contract is out of whack with national averages, and we can't compare ourselves to a town like Norwalk, who spends more than any other town in the state, or we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to Darien and Westport. It's not comparing apples to apples. But you know what? We can compete with towns like Westport and Darien, but not by using our limited resources for an 8% increase that does not include any structural pensions or health care reforms. Our teachers are amazing, and that is not in debate. And I can totally get behind a salary increase, even in the current fiscal crisis that we're currently in. Think of Fairfield in ways, it's a healthy subsidiary whose corporate parent, the state, is actively trying to keep the lights on. It's going bankrupt. We're going to get less and less. We'll be coming our way from the state, and the impact of GE's departure is going to really hit us this year. And let's not forget that GE's departure was predicated by an increase in taxes. And lastly, the new federal tax plan, it does Connecticut no favors, and it will lead to more families, retirees, leaving the state. But Fairfield can weather this storm and flourish. But this requires some level of fiscal discipline. This contract ignores this new reality that we're faced with. If these were better times, I would be one of the first people up here supporting this. And we all know this is going to pass. So I'm going out on a limb here to implore the moderate fiscal Democrats to send a message. Not that we're going to vote this down, but please, I ask you to join and send a message that these types of increases are too much in the current environment. If you vote against this 8% raise with no structural reforms, we can use some of these funds directly in the classroom through the education budget instead of a contract that is just too much at this time. And put the kids and the taxpayers above party, and I implore those those moderate fiscal Dems to join me tonight and vote against this contract. Thank you so much.
Representative Gerber?
Bill Gerber, District 2. Is Dr. Jones here tonight? There you go. First of all, I want to let Mr. Farnan, Representative Farnan, know that I'm not only I'm actually more than a moderately fiscal Democrat. I'm probably a conservatively fiscal Democrat, and I'm really in favor of this contract. I think it's a great contract.
Please hold your applause. Please do not applaud.
but I want to explain a couple things. First of all, and through no fault of Mr. Ambrose and Mr. Farn, who I respect a lot, the 8.2%, which has been thrown around a lot, that's a number that has literally zero meaning. And I'd like to explain why. Just going back in history, the last contract from fiscal year 2016 through the end of this year, so sort of I'm using current estimates that are in the budget right now, that we were told that was a 9% increase, 3% per year. As of now, and it probably will even go down, we've seen a 3.9% increase, which is 1.3% a year. So what I would like to ask Dr. Jones is, we were presented a 9% increase. It looks like it's 3.9. We were presented a 3% annual increase. It looks like it's 1.3. Would you be willing to come up and sort of explain where the differences might lie between, not specifically, but sort of conceptually? Or can someone come up and explain why we thought it would be 9 and it ended up being 3.9?
Good evening, I'm Colleen Deasy. I'm the Executive Director of Personnel and Legal Services at Fairfield Public School. It's because we calculate the increases and we also budget using actual staff who are in the budget and employed by FPS at the time that we make the calculations. Any turnover would result in the difference.
Okay, well, thank you. So this past contract, 3% per year, 9% over 3 years, is actually 1.3 or 3.9 over 3 years. Going back to the contract before that, we got a summary from Attorney Houston for that contract. It said over 3 years it was going to be a 6.6% increase, which equates to a 2.2% average annual increase. It was a 0% actual increase, which is a 0% annual increase over each of the 3 years. So, I had asked Dr. Jones, and I thank you for responding to all my, questions the best you could. I know I asked for some things that you would feel uncomfortable providing, but you did provide turnover numbers for the last 3 years and retirement numbers. So we had 70 retirements in the last 3 fiscal years, and what happens is this 8% increase that people keep, 8.2% that people keep throwing out, that never happens because the teachers come in, they see a schedule, they sign a contract, and they step up each year based on their expected schedule, and then they hit the max and they keep working for several more years, maybe many more years, then they retire, and then we hire a new person that comes in at a lower level, starting their career, and they start the process over again. This 8% is like saying no one ever retires. It never happens. And so we had 27 retirements in 2016, we had 24 in 2017, we had 19 expected for 2018. That's a $2.6 million reduction in wages. There's an additional $1.5 million that offsets this increase as well, and that $1.5 million is probably turnover. I'd asked, non-retiree turnover, and I'd asked Dr. Jones for that number, and she said, really, she doesn't want to project for this year or going forward because you never know. And actually, she didn't want to project retirees going forward either because she doesn't want to be held to a number that, could change. But it's never been less than 19 in the last 3 years. And so if I look at this upcoming contract and I just assume we're going to have 19 retirements per year, it goes from 2.66% per year, or 8% in total, to 5.4% over the 3 years, and a 1.75% total, 1.75% per year. And if you add in expected turnover, it'll probably go down to 1.5%. And this plays out over and over and over again. And it kind of bothers me when I see the headline number and when I hear my colleagues say 8.2%, 6.2%, 9%, because that number never materializes. It's not a real number. And you can sort of, I went back over since 2010, and I looked at the wages that were negotiated and the wages that actually were actual, and I saw that the actual increase in wages since 2010 has been about 1.56% per year. Never, really, never, it's very consistent. And during that time, we actually increased staff. So the average increase has been less than 1% a year per staff. I don't see how anyone can call that irresponsible. I don't see how anyone can call that excessive. I think our teachers have done a wonderful job keeping this town affordable to the extent they can, and I'd like to mention a couple of things that our teachers have done. Number one, other than agree to reasonable, wage contracts. In the last contract, you looked around the state, most school districts were having their teachers pay for about 15 to 17% of their health care costs. Our teachers agreed to become the highest in the state at 23%. The highest of 169 towns, they agreed to that. And to me, that was incredible and really showed a willingness to compromise and try to keep this town as affordable as possible. A couple years ago, we got into a little bit of a pickle, the school district, with some issues that, unforeseen costs. And the opportunity came to the superintendent's attention to switch out of our plan managed by Fairfield into the Connecticut State 2.0 plan. Our teachers were the first school district that agreed to go into the Connecticut 2.0 plan proactively. They didn't have to be pushed. They didn't have to be strong-armed. They were the only bodies in this town that did it, actually. That saved us, over the last 2 years, $5 million as a town. This year, Dr. Jones just announced we may see another $1 million of benefit from that versus the old plan that we had. That is an extraordinary, extraordinary commitment that the teachers have shown towards this town. And to me, it's a long-term view that they're taking. They realize, in my opinion, from what I believe, that the teachers realize that this town isn't Westport, that we have a wider range. We have more people probably on fixed income. I don't know the facts, but it appears to me that we have a wider range of incomes in this town. We've got some very wealthy, and we've got some people that are just getting by. And to me, this is an acknowledgement of that, keeping this town, keeping the school district sustainable for the long term. And I just want to thank the teachers for that, and I want to thank the administration for negotiating a great contract. I know my Democratic colleagues agree with me. I am not sure why my Republican colleagues don't. They have their own reasons, but I want to thank you all very much.
Representative Horton?
Good evening, Margaret Horton, District 9. First, I'd like to thank the teachers in our town. Certainly, they're an amazing group of hardworking and passionate individuals. Our children are incredibly lucky to have them. On a personal note, I can certainly say that the schools are the #1 reason that my husband and I chose to live in Fairfield, and we're very excited that our oldest is finally in kindergarten, so we're able to benefit from the schools. I believe that this is a fair contract. I thank both the teachers and the Board of Ed for their work on this. I'd like to remind my colleagues that our mandate is to either support or reject the contract as it's been put forth to us. It's not within our scope of our mandate to amend the details of the contract. Certainly fiscal responsibility during these challenging economic times is the highest priority for all of us. While it was briefly touched on before, I do think it's essential that we consider the potential economic impact of rejecting this contract and going to arbitration. My albeit limited understanding of state laws related to arbitration, such as taking into account the wealth of the town, current market rates, etc., suggests to me that we are, as the town, are likely to lose if this were to go into arbitration. The legal fees alone would likely be astronomical, let alone the economic impact that a loss in arbitration would mean. Through the moderator, I'd like to respectfully request that the Board of Ed Attorney perhaps clarify some of the potential costs of arbitration.
Attorney Cedar, can you answer that question about the cost of arbitration?
Stephen Cedar, I'm the attorney for the Board of Education. What I did last time was put into perspective the cost of the arbitration. The last time we went to interest arbitration was for the administrators, and the sole issue that was at stake there was the insurance, plan design, and premium cost share. One issue, and that cost, I believe, was $95,000. What I tried to express at the last meeting was that, in my estimate, if this case were to go to arbitration, it would be in excess of 2 times that amount, because there are several more issues on the table. I believe there's in excess of 30 potential issues on the table. So at interest arbitration, each issue is its own trial, so to speak. So the costs of going to interest arbitration would be significant. You also need to keep into account that it's not just the attorney's fees that you would be paying for. You would also be needing to pay for the arbitration fees, as well as the court reporter costs, as well as the transcripts. So I don't think I could even say that the total cost would be twice as much as they were last time. I think they would be likely well in excess of that. And to finally answer the other question about the economic impact, what I wanted to note was that when we're talking about the wage increase here, I don't want to in any way, shape, or form indicate or imply to you that the amount that is in this contract, the 8.2%, is the maximum amount that could be obtained at interest arbitration. If this matter were to go to interest arbitration, there is nothing from keeping the teachers' union from proposing a higher wage increase than that was settled upon. The arbitrator cannot split the difference between the parties' last best offers. The arbitrator will look at one and look at the other and select that one. And I just want to make sure that I got it clear that the 8.2% that is agreed upon here is not the maximum that could be obtained at interest arbitration. Did I answer your question? Yes. Thank you.
Any further comment from members of the body? Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. My comments are going to be brief. I've lived here 26 years. I put my 4 boys through Fairfield Public Schools. It's been a fantastic experience. Not many people are aware that, except for all of the teachers that are here, that you do not receive Social Security, and I'm sure you're worried about the pension at the state level. You guys work very hard. The money you earn, I believe you deserve. So I just want to thank you for being such good members of the Fairfield community in the past, through negotiating, being the first union to accept the 2.0, go to the state medical health insurance. It's a huge savings for the town, so thank you for that. I also want to thank you for the part of the premium that you're paying, because it is a huge part. My husband's self-employed, and I know all those costs are big, and you're accepting them, and thank you for supporting Fairfield.
Further comment from members of the body? Representative Walk.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Jay Walkham, District 5. First, I want to thank all the teachers that are here. And usually during budget time and committee time, I've always said that policemen and firemen don't make enough, and I've always added, and teachers don't also. So, on that note, and people who know me, I always speak from my heart. So this is from my heart, that my children have received a great education by above-average, excellent teachers. This is a 3-year contract that hits the average 8%. 3-year increase for our region. We have above-average teachers, and our Republican friends want them to be paid at below average. Teachers should be paid fairly, and that is what this contract achieves. I 100% support this contract. Thank you.
Further comments from members of the body? Representative Barrett?
Steve Barrett, District 6. A little bit of nostalgia for me today, because in 1969, I was a 4-year-old and I walked through these doors into kindergarten. 13 years later, I walked out the doors of Andrew Ward High School, and in that time, the Fairfield teachers of the past inspired me to go into a career in education. After completing college, I did just that, and I'm a teacher at a neighboring community, public school teacher, neighboring community. While I devoted my professional career to the teaching of students in another community, people in this room over here devoted their career to teaching my students, and I see very familiar faces here. So I want to thank them for all they've done for my children, and no one appreciates the job of a teacher better than a teacher. So when I look at this contract, I look at 3 things. Is it well thought out? Is it reasonable? And is it fair? And in my mind, the answer is yes to all those. And thank you very much for what you do for my children.
Further comments from members of the body? Representative Tallman?
Hi, Peter Tallman, District 8. I know a lot of teachers. I know a lot of teachers in this room. I have relatives who are teachers. Last but not least, my wife is a public high school teacher. But my allegiance is to the town and the taxpayers. After we heard the State of the Town address, it's obvious how much money is being taken from us. We simply can't afford to do this right now. Seniors are going to be leaving. They're already leaving. I got another email today from another senior saying, we can't afford to stay here anymore. What's going to happen when this balloons up to 3.5%? On the other side, we're having wealthy people leave because they're smart enough to realize they don't have to stay here and keep paying the craziest taxes in the country. And it's not just this contract, it's all of them. So I can't vote for the contract. I might be sleeping on the couch tonight because my wife's a teacher, but my allegiance is to the town and the taxpayers. I love all you teachers dearly, but you have to understand the situation we're in. Thank you.
Further comments from members of the body? Representative Iacono?
Pamela Iacono, District 8. Just a few months ago, the Board of Finance gave a directive to the Board of Education to think about their financial house, and they gave them 12 months to get their financial house in order. And I asked the chairman of the Board of Education during our committee meetings if this contract settlement met the directive of the Board of Finance. The chairman answered yes. Mr. Moderator, through you to the chairman of the Board of Finance, does this contract meet the majority directive of the Board of Finance? And is this in line with setting us up for the fiscal reform that you are looking for?
Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening. In a word, no. I'm sorry to say that the contract does not address what our concerns are. I thought Mr. Tetra laid it out pretty well earlier. There's a lot of economic uncertainty in this state. There's certainly a lot of economic uncertainty with the town. We have significant revenue pressures, not just by the state, but by GE leaving, as well as what's going on at the federal level. As Mr. Tetro has said, in fact, he said it in an open forum that he and I held with the League of Women Voters a few weeks ago, we've got a tough next few years coming ahead of us. And I couldn't agree more that part of our challenge is going to be increasing the grand list. The problem with that is that takes some time. And that's not going to happen overnight, whether it be the work that TP&Z needs to do or whether it be the work that the strategic planning committee needs to do. We're talking years in that. And we're confronting something that's right on top of us in terms of these revenue shortfalls. Have we warned about this for the last 2 years, actually at the end of our budget process? And we've spoken to the Board of Education several times about this. And we've asked them to work diligently at structural change, which means how we deploy our capital, how we spend our funds, how we deliver our services. Now, my board has been very good for as long as I've been on it at supporting education, at supporting the operating budgets year after year, at supporting the specific capital plans that have come before us, at working with them in creative ways. We have enormous respect for the teachers, for the administrators, for the Board of Education, as well as for all our town departments. The question isn't, do we want the best educational system around? Undoubtedly, everybody in this room does. The question is, what can we afford? We need to provide the best educational system we can at the price we can afford. And affordability is becoming a significant issue as we move forward. I also want to comment on something Mr. Gerber said. I'm the son of a teacher, the godson of a teacher, and I'm married to a teacher. I, for a living, work in restructuring companies, reorganizing things. That's what I do. I help companies with fiscal problems. To enter into a contract believing that you need retirements or swap over in staff turnover to hit that contracted objective is a very slippery slope to go behind. I've been in rooms where contracts have come up for discussion, and the answer has been, well, if we fire them and replace them with cheaper, we'll hit our budget. That's not discussions that we want a newly signed contract to bring about across this town. So, simple answer to your question is, sadly, this does not hit the objective. I'm terribly sorry for that. None of us wants to be in this position. None of us in this room created this position, but it's where we find ourselves as a community. And I hope you can all appreciate that. And thank you for the time, and thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Chairman Flynn. On that note, I just had a couple of things that are of concern to me. We all love our teachers. We're all very clear about that. My grandmother was a teacher. My mother was educated as a teacher. My aunt was a third grade teacher. I come from a long line of teachers as well. I've consistently supported public education. I've been in the negotiating room on these contracts, in that exact room, in that exact seat. What is of grave concern to me now is what's going to happen as this contract progresses. This year, Dr. Jones has factored in a 1.5% salary increase into her budget. Yet the Board of Education spent the other evening moving money around, pre-purchasing products, trying to figure things out in order to avoid a 20% reduction to school allocation. And that's just on a 1.5% salary increase, which I'm not saying isn't deserved. It's well deserved. But what's going to happen in the third year of this contract when we get to 3.52%? What are we going to be asking our children in the classroom to give up in terms of programming, to factor in and pay for the 3.52%? That's of great concern to me. And that's why I'm having a difficult time being able to accept this contract the way it was written. That and the fact that we've now heard from the Board of Finance that it did not meet their financial directive. And I think that should give us all some pause.
Further comments from members of the body? Seeing none, we'll go to the public. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Pistilli?
I'll try. Sharon Pistilli, District 3. I reviewed, all of the information that's been provided to us, and I took a look at, for the 4 towns and 5 school systems that have provided their competitive wage rates so far, and the median of those is around 7.8%, and so we're just above that median within the competitive range, about 1.8% above median. That, in combination with the fact that the teachers have signed on to the state Plan 2.0, which has caused us to have some considerable soft cost savings on benefits, when you look at these together, it demonstrates the fairness of the contract. And the future of the town really relies largely on the competitiveness of the school system. And so, looking at it in aggregate, it seems like a very fair contract, and I wanted to thank the teachers and thank everyone.
Further comments from members of the body? Representative Gale?
Hannah Gale, excuse me, Hannah Gale, District 6. So I guess I want to ask a question through you, Mr. Moderator, to the Chairman of the Board of Finance, Mr. Flynn.
Mr. Flynn's not in the room.
Oh. Well, then I don't know exactly what to do. So I'm going to still state my question, and maybe someone else from the Board of Finance can answer it. So given that we're having a real discussion here, and not just really talking about the state of finances in general, which we all agree is difficult. We know because the chairman of the Board of Ed, Mr. Dwyer, told us in our committee meetings that when the contract was negotiated, it was purposely backloaded because there was uncertainty at that time as to what was going to happen with the state budget. So we were told, we all understand that balloon of the 3.5% coming in the third year was not something that was ideal. It was a situation that occurred because of what was going on at the time. But here we are, and here is the contract, and so my question is, now that Mr. Flynn is back in the room, is would you really recommend that we risk the fiscal issues that might occur with the cost of arbitration? Given that we all do understand what the issues of the contract are, and that they were created out of the uncertainties of the time when it was negotiated, and the backloading was put in because of the uncertainty of the 2018-19 school year. Would you actually recommend that we risk that, the cost of arbitration?
First of all, excuse me, I was otherwise detained, and that's embarrassing. But secondly, to answer your question very specifically, yes. I wish it didn't come to the point where we went to arbitration. I wish it had actually been resolved beforehand in a way that was more in line with what we had hoped. The honest answer is we have to worry about affordability. We also have to worry about precedent. We just had a fireman's contract. I think they took a 0, did they not, Mr. Tetra? In the first year, they took a 0. We have other contracts that are now coming up for negotiation. And we have to worry about, and my board in specific, has to worry about the totality of this. And the largest expense to the town on an annual basis, by far, is the expense of personnel costs. So, and this just happens to be the largest of those personnel costs. So it's something we've got to be mindful of. And remember, the state isn't the problem in causing us additional pain here at town because they signed a CPAC agreement, which is a contractual obligation to their employees that limited their financial flexibility. So what do they have to do now? Because they've locked that in, they have to look for other areas where they can cut expenses, such as coming to the municipalities, such as pushing pension costs back down, which, by the way, although we put that off for a year, maybe 2 years, that issue's not going away. And we could still be on the hook for those pension costs coming back towards us.
But I'd like to remind the body that it was definitely negotiated, that this contract would be renegotiated if that occurred. Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator.
Is there further comment from members of the body? Seeing none, we'll take public comment. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment on the contract? Please form a line near the microphone. Please identify yourself before speaking. We're going to stick to a 90-second time limit.
90 seconds, wow.
We've got a lot of...
Frank Sahagian, as a resident, a teacher, a member of the FEA bargaining unit as well, who participated in this collective bargaining process, I urge you to vote in favor of this contract. It was bargained in good faith on both sides. Neither side got everything we wanted. It does a fair job in moving teachers in Fairfield towards being compensated fairly and competitively. And having said that, you were made aware of other agreements in our DRG which shows that where we settled can be characterized as average. I find it absurd to so cavalierly dismiss what other towns are paying their teachers and say in the same breath that we support education. There's been some concern expressed about the fact this contract did not smooth out the increase over 3 years, with the largest increase in the third year. Yet, as you also heard, it was not surprising that this concession was made on the part of the teachers. Having said that, as Mr. Gerber so astutely pointed out, the increase is not really going to be the 8% due to the methodology used in calculating the increases, which unfortunately is the standard method. It assumes that we all know the teachers in the system stay and move along the step scale, which we know is fallacious. So remember, it's not only unlikely, it's absolutely guaranteed that the increases will be nowhere near 8%, and the breakage goes to the town. This should allay any fears about this 3%. Actual numbers, 2016-17 school year, the negotiated salary account was $80.4 million. The actual salary pool was more than $3.6 million lower, coming in at $76.8 million. You should know that there are just under 400 teachers of the 960 in this district who ought to be considered in the red zone, meaning they are could leave Fairfield and can get paid at least 10% or more than what they're currently earning. And many of these are in what are considered shortage areas: science, math, special education. It's not anecdotal evidence that the turnover rate in Fairfield has steadily increased over the past 7 years from 4% to 8%. And as you previously heard about the cost share, health insurance, 23%, one of the highest in the state. Lastly, what's really striking from a competitive standpoint, compare our proposed budget to Westport's right now. A novel way you might want to look at it, salaries and benefits expressed in dollars per student. Westport's would amount to more than $17,200 per student, right at Fairfield's entire PPE. 82% salary and benefits to our 76%. I can only hope and trust that a concern about a lack of smoothing the schedule is far from a good reason to vote against this contract. And as you all too well know, a vote of no is a vote for yes for arbitration. And hopefully this body has learned the lesson of the cost of arbitration, as Mr. Cedar rightfully pointed out. I find it kind of ironic to hear arguments put forth that this is fiscal responsibility to take it to arbitration to make a point. Where is the fiscal responsibility in that? How sad it is to see that the political posturing we heard and saw tonight was about this contract. Please vote for this contract so that Fairfield can slow down the departure of good teachers and see that we can go ahead and take care of our 10,000 students. Thank you.
Hi, Tina Brown. Not as long as his. One thing that hasn't been mentioned, you know, you've talked about the fact that the state came and asked the town for money for the pension because the state didn't have it, and the town said no, and all the towns said no. Well, guess who's paying more? Every teacher in the state of Connecticut got a paycheck lower in January than they got in December because 1% of our pay has been taken to the pension. So we're paying 1% more into the pension. And as Ms. Georgiada said, we don't get Social Security. You pay no Social Security tax for any teacher. That's a 6.2% windfall savings that every private company has to pay. You pay nothing into our pension. We're paying it. Come September, some people will make back that 1% that they just lost, but not everybody. A half a step raise isn't a 1% raise for everybody in there. So some people will wait until September of 2019 to even take home the same amount of money. And lots of people have been talking about teacher turnover. This is just people I know well enough and only at Fairfield Ludlow High School. AP Chem, Darien. AP Bio, Westport. AP Physics, the first one went to Bethel, where he took a pay cut but was respected. The second one left last summer, no place to go. She's now in California. The third one left last week in the middle of the school year. The bio teacher left in the middle of the school year last year. AP Math, Westport, AP English, Westport. And again, these were just people I worked in the same vicinity of the building that I knew well enough that they told me where they went. And that's one school out of all of our schools. So yeah, when you don't pay a competitive rate, you ask us to pay 23% of the insurance, which we've paid highest in the state. We work more teacher days than any other school in our area, and we have twice as many after-school meetings at 42 compared to 20 in every other district. Thank you.
My name is Lisa Carpenter. I am a fourth grade teacher at Holland Hill. As I would leave my classroom every evening at 6, 7 o'clock, and I would bring work home on the weekends, a good portion of my weekend spent on the work I had to do. I did it because I love my students. I did it because I wanted to do a good job for them. What I'm hearing here is a message that a no vote means that you're accepting a less quality education. And I ask myself as a teacher who cannot give my students less than my best, what is the message you're sending to me? What are you telling me to do? What are you saying? Yes, we can't afford it, so there's going to be less of a quality of education. Where does that leave me? Does that mean I work less? I do less? Is that what the message you're sending to teachers? Yes, it's okay. I can tell you that the town of Fairfield, gets hours and hours and hours of free time that teachers are not paid for. And we're willing to keep doing that. But we're asking you to just say, we appreciate it. You want our best, send us a message that you appreciate it. And we will keep working overtime for your children because we love them. Thank you.
So Bob Smoller, I'm the president of the Teachers Association, and just thought I'd bring some different kinds of facts in. I know the town has been talking a lot about grand lists lately, so I recently spreadsheeted all 169 towns in the state of Connecticut and looked for correlations between things like mill rate and quality of the school system and teachers' contracts over the last 9 years. And what you saw, if you looked at the data, is that there's a 70% correlation between higher teachers' contracts and higher home values. And what you see also in the data is from 2008 to the current period, those towns that invested in teacher contracts have seen their housing values rise precipitously, but those towns that got a little chintzy on their teachers' contracts saw their housing values backtrack. And we have, in fact, in Fairfield, been backtracking on our home values over the course of the last 8 years. And you can just see it in the data, and I will be sharing that data with the town bodies as well. Over the last 7 years, excuse me, the average teacher contract has been 2.33% at the negotiating table. What we've experienced is 0.54% increases for the teachers. And that's because of the turnover, and we describe that as the breakage. And with all due respect to some of the other speakers that have spoken here tonight, when you're running a business, you deal with the reality of your business. And the reality is that we will be experiencing turnover. It happens regularly. And while we can't talk about breakage, or we don't acknowledge breakage in the negotiating over the negotiating table, the very reason why you're looking at a backloaded contract is because the district knows that you're going to have 3 years worth of turnover by the time you reach that final year of the contract, and it'll probably end up being about a 1% increase in the salary pool, or even less. Over the last 7 years, that breakage or that turnover has been worth about 2.5% per year. So a 2.5% increase in the contract basically translates to a 0, or a little bit above it. The other thing I would say to you is the teachers have taken 3 step freezes over the course of the last 7 years and saved this town $5 million in health insurance costs by quickly agreeing to the Connecticut State 2.0 plan, which you found out about. So we have bought into hook, line, and sinker what the town's concern about finances. All we're asking is that we have a shot at being able to come close to maintaining a reasonable standard of living by keeping up with a cost of living adjustment. Now, the last thing I'll leave you with is I have spreadsheeted every town in Fairfield County as far as salaries are concerned. We have dropped over the 7-year period from 10th in the county down to 19th. From people with years 6 to 14 years experience are being paid on average 84% of what people, the median from other towns. We are completely uncompetitive in that zone, and the only reason we're doing okay is because we're competitive at the high end. But over the next 10 years, you're going to see a lot of retirements at the top end of our teacher schedule, and we're not going to have those younger teachers coming up to become our new core because they'll have left since we don't have competitive salaries to keep them here. So I would hope you'd keep that in mind. Right now we're doing okay, and our school system has a pretty good reputation. But a few years down the road, if we don't invest in our teachers right now, you may find that Fairfield does not have the reputation we have currently, and you'll see the housing values and everything else reflect that. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm John Whaley. I live in Bridgeport, but I teach at Fairfield Ward High School. I actually have some of your kids in my class. I'm glad that Bob just went because I'm not a data or numbers guy, and that might not speak to you. But I do want to speak to what this gentleman said over here about allegiances. My allegiance, all of my colleagues' allegiances are to our students, which are your children. We are not entitled aristocrats sucking at the teat of the taxpayer. We are the men and women who often spend more time with your children than even you do. And we love every single minute. What those of you who are drawing the line in the sand over this reasonable contract are telling us, what you are telling your children is that you're more concerned about theories and probabilities than you are about ensuring that the amazing people who are educating and inspiring the next generations of citizens that make Fairfield the city on the hill, if you will, that it is. You're telling us in no uncertain terms that we are expendable, that we are not worth the money you pay us. If you want higher class sizes, vote against us. If you want our legions of Priuses and Elantras mitigated, vote against us. If you want to tell your kids that saving theoretical money is more important than fairly compensating the people who spend 20-plus hours on top of their typical work week to ensure the lesson will reach each and every one of them, to tell your kids that these people are less important than money, vote against us. However, if you believe in Fairfield teachers and if your allegiance is to your children, then you believe in this contract. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Barbara Markells. I live at 324 Roland Road in Fairfield, Connecticut. I wear about 5 hats. I'm a property owner. I'm a mother of 5 children. All 5 went through Fairfield Public Schools. All 5 went through college and graduated. All are successfully employed and out of the house. I attribute all of that to Fairfield education, and I'm very proud of the education my children received here at Fairfield. I hope that we continue to value the education that the children of Fairfield receive. Thirdly, I'm the wife of a realtor. I hope we continue to value our real estate in town. They go hand in hand. Fourthly, I'm a senior citizen. I turned 64 this year. I appreciate that taxes are difficult. I appreciate what senior citizens appreciate. I play pickleball with senior citizens. But anyway, I understand all of that. Fifthly, and most importantly tonight, I'm a teacher. And as a teacher, and the teachers here, we value your children. We value the quality of education. Don't sell them short. They deserve every bit of your attention. Thank you.
Jessica Gerber, 25 Shady Hill Road. As a board member, I voted for the FEA contract, and I hope that you will support it tonight. But right now, I'm talking to you as a parent. I know you've gotten a lot of information, facts, figures about this contract. What I'm addressing is something less fact-based and more emotion-based. I'm sure at least some of you right now are rolling your eyes and thinking a collective bargaining agreement shouldn't be emotionally driven, and you're right. But there is an emotional component to the profession of education that is unique. Teachers work with young children, children with special needs, children with special social and emotional issues, as well as children, adolescents, and teenagers who are coping with the everyday stress of life in 2018. It's important to remember that. I've had at least one child in Fairfield Public Schools since 2003, and will have at least one child in the system until 2020. As of now, we are up to 121 past and current FEA members who have impacted my children's lives. I am grateful to so many of them. I respect the work teachers do. I respect the time that teachers put into that work. And I realize that teachers' work does not solely take place in the classroom. These are educational professionals who are also role models and mentors. They're trusted adults who children turn to when they are scared, angry, happy, sad, concerned. You can't really put a price tag on that, nor can you find that on charts or graphs. And it's hard to measure that as a metric, but it should be recognized. One last personal detail. My son is a sophomore in college. He has many friends who attended some of the top private schools in the country, but has found that going to public school in Fairfield hasn't put him at a disadvantage, far from it. He is thriving, he is happy, he's excelling socially, maybe a little too much, and academically. But I can't help but think that one of the reasons he is doing so well is a result of the support and guidance of Fairfield teachers. Please support this fair and reasonable contract. Thank you.
Suzanne Misko, 123 Rygate Road. Teachers. Come from a long line of teachers. Teachers' contracts are going to be an emotional situation. They have to be. They're the people who we've charged with educating our students. The problem is that I have with this contract is that it was brought up at the Board of Ed meeting that there's a problem with the process. As a member of the public, the first time I got to see what is being discussed this evening was when it was given to this board. The numbers were not provided to the public at the Board of Ed meeting. We had no idea, as a member of the public or as a parent, what was being asked. Unfortunately, the situation that faces our town is not looking good. To watch and get constant emails that our libraries are closing and then we just finally got them back open, we have to be realistic. While I appreciate all the data that's been said tonight, the Board of Ed budget, with the majority of it being in salaries, has increased every single year. I don't know where the 0 is. I don't know where the 1% is. I don't know where the 3%. but that salary line goes up by 2% or whatever the contracted amount is every year. So if that number is not correct, then maybe we need to look at what the real actual salaries are and be fair to the side of the town that is paying the taxes. I believe in education. My son went through the schools, I went through the schools, my parents went through the schools. To say I don't believe in education is sadly wrong. But at a time when we're facing so many unknowns, to have a contract that potentially could be 8% is a concern. And there's no guarantee that we can stop this bus once it runs. Now, I don't know that I could agree with sending this to mediation. I'm concerned that a contract that's 125 pages or 28 pages long has 30 contentions within it. How it got here, I'm not sure. But you just gave the administrators a 1.5% increase. So what are we saying to everybody? How do you fix this? To hear that we gave the firefighters 0 is almost alarming. To hear that we'll go through a budget in front of the RTM and the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen, will we be discussing wheelbarrow wheels and hose links because we don't have enough money or our taxes are going to go high. It all has to be relative. And while I support our teachers, and I think they do a fine job, I am so proud of the work they did with my son. I do take offense that as a parent, I have no involvement in that. Parents and teachers are what makes the education in our town of Fairfield successful. Parents and teachers are the ones who nurture our children. It's not just one side. And while I support our teachers, this contract is just a little too rich for this castle on the top of the hill.
Hi, Deborah Darren, 2451 Mill Plain Road. And I did not plan anything to come up here, but felt if I came to this meeting, I needed to speak. I am a parent. I am an employee of the Fairfield Public School System. I pay my taxes, and I deserve to earn a reasonable wage. I deserve to be able to live in this town. Teachers are not just teachers anymore. We do everything from, I'm a social worker, so I am not a teacher, although I am. We take care of kids when they're crying. We take care of kids when their parents are divorcing. We take care of kids when they go home and there's no one home. If you walk through any of the schools in Fairfield after the school hours, you will find lights on in the classrooms with teachers in there. Will there be teachers that are out the door when the bell rings? Yes, there will. But we also know that there are police and fire and businessmen who also don't always do the right thing. The majority of your teachers are there working with your kids. We are there when they don't know how to learn. We are there when they are struggling. We take phone calls at night from other people so that we can talk about what's going on with your kids. We don't really have beginning and ends, some of us, because we work with your kids from when they're freshmen to when they're seniors. And then after that, the demands being placed on the people here as teachers are very high. You just have to look at what some of the parents demand from us. We are hard workers. We are all highly educated. We deserve to earn a wage. It's not astronomical. I can tell you in the 10 years I've lived here, my wages have not gone up 8 or 9 or 10 or 20%. A little bit at a time, and it's okay. I didn't get into the profession to be rich. No one can be a teacher or do what we do if we don't love your kids. You have to love kids and love what you're doing. We are why people want to send your kids, or people come to this town to come to our schools to be with the teachers who are there. Again, they're not all perfect, but on a whole, you have a really good school system here. My son is going through it. He's coming to high school next year, and there's nothing perfect, but I think you have a really good thing here, and you need to look at the big picture. You want people to stay, and you want people to be able to live here. Thank you.
Jennifer Kennelly, Fairfield resident on Edgewood Place and Board of Ed member. I'm not rising to address you because I think any of you are in any doubt where I stand on this issue. I fully support our teachers, and in this case, that support is represented by the approval of their contract, which just rises to the level of keeping us in the range of competitive for top teaching talent in Fairfield County. I was actually cautioned against speaking before you by more than one individual who basically viewed it as a waste of time. Yet here I am, and I speak now specifically to those of you intending to vote against this contract. It was felt that before some of you had seen many of the details of this contract, that based on your view of the political climate, your view of the situation in Hartford, or your long-held views of educational spending as demonstrated by past votes, that you were a lost cause. I have a difficult time accepting lost causes. After all, the Red Sox did finally win the World Series. Let me reason with you. You have before you a contract which is fair, as in it is in keeping, if not a notch below, neighboring districts. It is reasonable, as demonstrated by the measured increases over the course of the contract, resulting in an overall increase on paper only of about 8%. And it is affordable, as indicated at the time by the support of the Board of Finance's representative, whose sole job it was in negotiations to represent the financial interests of the town, and by the definitive data which made clear that we will never be paying that actual percentage, as has been referenced tonight. And I remind you that being in the negotiation gives you a very different perspective from the views of anybody outside of that room. And whether you like how the teachers' contract raises are applied over the next 3 years, or you wish they were smoother, the final result of an about 8% increase on paper is in line with what anyone could have hoped to have accomplished in that negotiation. Representative Iacono referenced last Monday that this contract vote was a done deal, as did Representative Farnan tonight, that there was no chance of it going to arbitration. Now, I'm in no position to take a whip count on that, so I don't know if it is true. But if it is, then I ask those of you who are determined to vote down this contract, who are determined to cast a losing vote in a losing enterprise, why? If you truly think this legislative body should vote to reject this contract, then you are explicitly saying that it is your thoughtful financial insight that we should send this contract to an expensive arbitration where we face the very real threat of paying a good bit more on top of the expenses of the arbitration itself. That is one heck of a financial risk and irresponsible risk for which you are advocating via your vote to reject. You have heard tonight a tremendous stream of numbers, but none of which explain how we could win in arbitration with a contract deal which has us virtually exactly at the average. But if, on the other hand, you do not believe that we should go to an expensive arbitration, and you are simply casting this vote as a symbol of your opposition to the contract, then I must challenge you, a symbol to whom? A symbol to our teachers, that you want them to do more with less, again, while working for a salary that might well be viewed, is viewed, as increasingly not competitive with our neighbors? A symbol to the parents of our school children and preschool children that you do not support the recruitment and retention of the best teachers? A symbol to realtors and local businesses that you do not support Fairfield being highly marketable to young parents compared to our neighbors? Or perhaps a symbol to those holding the view that any money spent on education in this town is simply too high a cost to be borne, no matter what services provided by this crucial foundation to our town. But more than anything, I was inspired to speak tonight by the words of Representative Michael Hurley, who uttered maybe the most passionate words one could say about our teachers and what they supply to the town of Fairfield. On December 18th of this past year, Representative Hurley said, and I quote, "What about our teachers? Our teachers make up the heart and soul of our town." I'm not about to stand here and speak to the private matter of how each of you looks after your soul. But how many of us have dealt with any kind of health issues over the past year or so and deferred action to a later date? I know I have a knee that after several surgeries is overdue for replacement, but I'll get to it when I get to it. But if you tell me that there is a real health issue with my heart, I am making a call that day to a cardiologist. And you know what? My first question on Facebook to moms of Fairfield when I'm looking for a recommendation is not, can you tell me who's the cheapest cardiologist out there? I ask that each of you consider the implication of your vote and vote as if you are the deciding vote in this matter. That you tip the scale to accept or reject this contract. That will be your statement to the town of what you value and what you value on behalf of your constituents. The data is very clear. There is nothing we could provide or fund in a classroom that has a greater impact on a child's education than a quality teacher. The data is clear. If you are truly interested in making every dollar count, in making this investment count, then there is no more sound investment you could make than to give our human resources the financial backing it needs to recruit and retain the best teachers throughout our district. Thank you.
Please hold your applause. Is there any further comment from members of the public? Is there anyone else after Mr. Flynn that's going to comment from the public? Because I would like to get everyone up at this time. So Mr. Flynn will be the last person to comment from the public.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Charles Flynn. I've been a teacher here for 20 years, and as a civics teacher, I look around the room, it's like a dream, because it really is what I love about Fairfield. People who care, people who volunteer, and I appreciate the time that this group gives and donates on nights like this. I know budget season is never your favorite. As I speak to you tonight, I apologize for coming in late. As an elected official myself, I was at my own board meeting and couldn't get here much earlier, although I may have sped a record from Orange to Fairfield in the last 20 minutes. I'm one of those people who has been frozen a number of times over the last 10 years. I am someone who is not being paid for my experience for the years that I've given, and I'm still here and happy to be here. It's an incredible privilege. We've sacrificed a lot as teachers over the last number of years. We jumped on the opportunity to save the town millions of dollars with our health insurance. As an elected official, I understand your need to represent all the voters. I understand your need to represent all the members of the town. This is very fair for the voters, it's very fair for the taxpayers, and it's fair for the teachers. I urge you to really give this consideration. This would do a lot for our morale in another year where we've sacrificed a lot for the town to give us a unanimous vote, to give us your support, to get us fired up as we get it there at that school tomorrow at 7 a.m. to get to work, and that's exactly what I plan on doing. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Please hold your applause. So we're now going to come back to the body for further comment from the body. Does any member of the body wish to address this issue? Representative Iacono.
Pamela Iacono, District 8. A couple of things to go through. First, Mr. Moderator, through you to Board of Finance member David Becker, would you wish to address Board of Education member Kennelly's commentary?
Mr. Becker.
Sure. Thank you. It's the second time that she had mentioned, not directly by name, but certainly by position, me. This occurred at the administrators. It occurred again tonight, certainly during that scathing rebuttal of just about everybody she could without actually mentioning their name, which I think is not really becoming of certainly anybody in this room that's an elected official. I am pretty frustrated here. This is now my fourth contract, second for the teachers, and I do want to clarify that I outweighed everything that the first selectman had in the state of the town. I also, as Mr. Flynn had mentioned earlier from the Board of Finance perspective, had made very clear our position, and I had made very clear the risk to the north of approximately $30 million in risk that this town has in this budget cycle and the next one. And I brought up the contract for the firefighters as a, not paid, but a firefighter in this town. It deeply concerns me that they're taking essentially zeros and net zeros repeatedly. I made most of those things quite clear. So to tie me to this in the manner in which I was, and to tie my board to this in that manner is very concerning. I was there, absolutely, and I believe I played, my role to advise, as I have anytime I've been a part of this. And I believe that from the board's perspective, they came out exactly where they ultimately wanted. But this does have significant risk to the town, and it's a really difficult position to be in. It's a very difficult position, I think, for the board, for the Board of Finance, for anybody else, the RTM who's got to vote on this tonight. We are facing, I think, actually potentially worse than what we saw during the recession. It's coming straight at us, gutting our funds. These aren't broad, global hypotheticals. They aren't risks to pension funds that later were almost nearly recouped. They're direct hits repeatedly that are gutting every single corner and are not going to stop. So specific to the comments, I don't mention what you're for or against. Stay away from what I'm for or against, and quite frankly the same to the board. And I wasn't at the committee meetings last week, but I heard, essentially watched on the video something similar occurring, and that's problematic. Hope that addresses it for what you're looking for.
Thank you very much, Mr. Becker. I just have a few final comments that I want to add based on what we heard from public comment from some members. And I want to talk about the reality of what really is going on rather than the emotional state of where everyone's trying to drive this. The reality is, in committee, there were 24 votes to accept this contract as it was written. So it is realistic and appropriate to say this contract is going to pass tonight. That was grounded in reality. So to make a big issue out of that, I don't understand where that's coming from. There are people, representatives, and we represent every single member of this town who have concerns. And I am legitimately concerned about what we potentially are going to give up at the end of this contract term. I mentioned it in committee. The town of Stratford almost laid off 40 teachers. They ended up having to take furlough days. Did union leadership ever take into consideration that we might be faced, and this union might have to look at that again? Was that something that was even raised with them? The president of the FEA, who spoke before us, who's running coincidentally for the CEA presidency, just mentioned the reality of business. That's what he wanted us to talk about, the reality of business. If we want to talk about the reality of business, then let's talk about union rules. We have a shortage of science teachers. There's no doubt about that. And if we're going to talk about business, in business, what happens when you have a shortage in something, you separate that item out, and yes, that particular position is paid more. It's called the basic law of supply and demand. But I didn't see anything in this contract that separated out where we're having an issue with our turnover and our demand. And our turnover and demand has been in the science and technology and math area. So why was there not a discussion then from the union to break out this science, because we're losing those people, and put them in a different lane or on a different track, or pay them so that we can keep them? If you graduate from school tomorrow with your BA, you are coming to the Fairfield School Districts, you're getting paid $48,000 a year. I think that's a fair wage. I don't think it's too high, I don't think it's too low. I think it's fair. So I ask you to remove the emotion from this and think about this in practical terms. And lastly, I just want to leave you with the fact that we negotiated a contract that has come in higher than the state average, while Fairfield continues, as our own first selectman has told us, to have a bullseye on our back about what Fairfield can afford. So if we're coming in with a contract that's above the state average, does that put a bigger bullseye on us for Hartford and signal that they can cut our state reimbursement funding more? That's all I was trying to address. That's all many members were trying to address. Really think it's unfair to put an emotional standpoint on this. I'm truly concerned about what this means for teachers at the end of this term.
Further comments from members of the body? Seeing none, the clerk can take a roll call vote. And I'll read the resolution again, just to remember. This is a resolution to reject the contract. So a yes vote is a vote in favor of rejecting the contract. A no vote is in favor of accepting the contract. Resolved that in accordance with Connecticut General Statute 10-153DB, the collective bargaining agreement between the Board of Education and the Fairfield Education Association for the period of July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2021 is rejected. That's the resolution for us. And if the clerk could please call a roll call vote.
Peter Ambrose?
Yes.
Ed Davidson?
Yes.
Nancy Lefkowitz? No. Keith Varian?
Yes.
Bill Gerber?
No.
Aaron Lopez? No. Eric Newman?
No.
Cindy Perham?
No.
Heather Dean? No. Alex Durrell?
Abstain.
Matthew Jacobs?
No.
Sharon Pastilli? No. Bill Pierce?
No.
Marcy Spolier? No. Josh Garsbaugh?
No.
Joe Siebert?
No.
Liz Smay?
No.
Jay Wolf?
No.
Matt Ambrose?
No.
Steve Barretts?
No.
Hannah Gale?
No.
Lisa Havey?
No.
Jill Vergara? No. Karen Wackerman?
No.
Carrie Burcham? No. Pamela Iacono?
Yes.
Christine Messina? Yes. Kate Tallman?
Yes.
Brian Farnan?
Yes.
Drew Georgiadis?
No.
Dorian Herron?
No.
Margaret Horton?
No.
Sam Cargill?
Yes.
Michael Hurley?
Yes.
Frank Batiste?
Yes.
Eric Sundman?
Yes.
The vote's 11 to 24 to 1, so the motion to reject the contract fails. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to take from the table item number 16, to establish a special committee to review Article 3 of Chapter 95 of the Town Code, tax relief for elderly and disabled homeowners. Moved by Representative Vergara, seconded by Representative Wackerman. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, is there any comment from the public? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? That was very stressful. Abstentions? That item carries. So at this point, we're going to take a recess very briefly for a special legislative management committee to meet, and then come back to us and populate the committee. Representative Vergara, can you make the announcement from SLMC?
Jill Vergara, District 7. The SLMC just populated the Senior and Disabled Tax Relief Committee for this session. The members will be Michael Hurley, Peter Tallman, myself, Mark McDermott, and Cindy Parham.
Thank you, Representative Vergara. Item number 17, to consider and act upon any other matters presented to said meeting and which may be properly acted upon under the rules of the representative town meeting. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Representative Dean, seconded by Representative Wackerman. Thank you. We're adjourned.